Hello, I'm Nathan Bosdet, 151 Hubbard Street, member of the Planning Board, and I'll be discussing Article 33, a bylaw amendment to two-family dwelling units. You can think of this in some ways as a complement to Article 32, which Mr. Flint went over, in the sense that it is also looking to create additional, less expensive, smaller housing options for the people of Concord. So quickly, just to go over the kind of broad aspect of it, it's meant to amend section 4.2.2.1 of the bylaw to allow the board to grant a special permit to the construction of a new two-family dwelling or alteration of an existing single-family dwelling into a two-family dwelling within the Residence C zoning district. So I just want to stop there and point out that this is one difference for Article 33 versus Article 32. This is restricted to Residence C zoning. So the primary objectives are to gain additional housing that has a less expensive price point, that is in and around transit, shopping, and cultural hubs, and while maintaining the existing dimensional and setback requirements, and by having the developments go through a special permit process so that there's a means of maintaining the all-important character of Concord. So building on to the idea of maintaining neighborhood character, prior to 1928 and formalization of zoning within Concord, two-family developments or homes were pretty common. If you go on my street, Hubbard Street, you'll see a number of them. Any other parts of West Concord, you'll see them. You'll see them there. So we know that there's 106 two-families today. 66 of those are within Residence C. So to allow for these as new developments would not be, out of the norm for what you would see in and around Concord currently. Just to quickly go through some of the basics and potential concerns maybe around the two-family bylaw terms. So the occupancy requirements, there would be none. It would be possible to rent them out. Sale restrictions, there would be none. Conversion to two-unit condo could be allowed. Detached structures, not allowed. So they would, by two-family, they would need to be joined. Dimensional requirements, they would have to follow the same existing setback and height and floor area ratio requirements that are currently required for Residence C. And min and max unit size, again, following the existing requirements. And there would be no, there would be no expiration on it. The special permit is permanent and transferable. So how did we get to choosing Residence C as sort of the boundary for these two families? Initially, in our deliberation on this, we talked about looking at walking distance of half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. We thought about half-mile radius out of any center point in Concord and West Concord, and we decided against those for a few reasons. And it was just that Residence C was an existing overlay that aligned with some of the things that we were trying to do, which was, as shown here, is to add density or allow for added density around those transportation and shopping hubs. And that, again, keeping with the character, most of the existing two-family homes are within that sort of range as well. And to keep to scale, basically, the Residence C zoning requirements fit what we were trying to do. And of course, the obvious one, it just removes the complexity of adding yet another overlay district that could cause problems further down the line. Similarly to Article 32 that Mr. Flint talked about, the two-family amendment fits with Envision Concord, again, looking for means of increased density within the town centers and transportation hubs. I won't go through reading all of them there. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Envision Concord. I can take some questions and comments, but again, this is meant as a directional goal. So it doesn't mean that there will be a bunch of two families that suddenly pop up overnight, but we would like to allow for it to try and move toward our shared goals. Yes.
Hello, Brian Folds, 33 Riverdale. I have a question about driveways. So I live over in the Riverdale neighborhood, the South Meadow neighborhood, and one of the ways that's being developed, because it's the largest lots in Zone C, is quite large houses are going in, but that's, he's telling me to be closer to the mic. So large houses are going in, and a good number of them had requested the variance to move it 3 feet to one side so that they could put a driveway in to a garage that's essentially in the backyard. With a two-family, my fear is that you would have two driveways down either side of the property going to two garages in the back, thus making quite a large amount of a small lot impermeable, and neighbors or butters would then have driveways on either side, which I know from experience. A neighbor of mine, spec builder, built a house there, put the garage in the back. He literally put the pavement on the property line, and then after he was done, the real estate agent said it doesn't look very pretty, so he asked the neighbor to plant shrubs to screen their house. So I want to kind of ask this question while we think about multifamilies and that two driveway problem.
I think that's a great question. I think that came up when we had some discussions about this before for both the additional dwelling units and this. And the first thing I would say for the two families is that because it is by special permit, it would be something that would be discussed at the planning board. And I mean, I think I can speak for most of us, and conceptually where we want to go is not to have that sort of design where you would have two separate driveways. The idea is to sort of lessen that, right? So that you have two families now living in a shared space, and as opposed to living in two plots and having their own driveways, that they would share a driveway, share a garage space potentially. So I think the immediate answer is that the special permit process would sort of be a break on that.
And
it would be the ZBA that would be granting the special permit.
So the ZBA would be able to review and say they don't like the two driveways, but do they have any guidance on that, or is it just sentiment?
Well, I think
we need to develop that.
You need to develop guidance. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Turn it down if you want. You can change the angle.
How about that? Is that good?
Yeah.
Ruth Lauer, Kais Road. I have two questions. No, question and a comment. Thank you, ma'am. Resident C, oh, now that just hurts. So I'm very tall. So Resident C is centrally located, tends to be quarter acre or so
That's
zoning.
Yes.
And it's pretty much all developed. So how is this going to work that we don't just have a slew of California teardowns and put up a two-family house?
Do you want to answer, or I could too?
Well, so I think practically we wouldn't necessarily see that. Developers would have to weigh, the cost and benefit of doing any tear down and whether they're going to put in a larger single-family house that occupies the same volume, or if it's worth doing a two-family that occupies that volume. So that's one part. And the other part I would go back to is again that the idea of a two-family within the residency district isn't uncommon right now. What we've seen actually is over the past 20 years, I guess, is a shift in the other direction, which is former two families being turned into single families. So I think it's a great question. I understand your concern. I don't know that we would, see an immediate burst in two-family developments in that way. But I don't know if our chair was going to say anything else.
Well, I was just going to say that, having met with real estate professionals in Concord, I think the biggest challenge will be whether we can get developers to choose the two-family option instead of a single-family home for a tear down. And so we want to really make the option possible. But, today, the economics, we don't know if the market has changed enough to say that 2 half-sized units will sell for more than the 1 full-size. And so what we want to do is see if we can get it to start to happen, because the demographics of the town are changing, and the units that are being built, simply because there are no other alternatives in our zoning today, don't match those future demographics. So that's what we're trying to open up.
Thank you. And one comment. This might not be true for everybody, but for me, planning and the results of are very visual. And we've had what I would call an anti-planning report, because I can't see anything that you're telling me about. I think it would benefit from more photos and diagrams and such, so that we can picture what this would look like.
Okay, that's good feedback. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Michelle Flem, 324 Sudbury Road, Concord, Mass. So I'm going to add one comment, and I have one question. So to second what she's saying there, one of my biggest concerns is that there's a number of historic houses on Thoreau Street, and that are in Residence C and could fit into the model that she's talking about. A good example would be that there was a house on Thoreau Street right next to Concord Housing Authority housing that was torn down. It was a 1,200 square foot house, and it became a 6,000 square foot house, and was part of the reason why we're having all these discussions now about tear downs. So in my view, I think it really should be taken seriously, the idea of what this impact could be, because we all know how popular condos are in town, and that therefore, it is very likely that if it becomes a two-family, that it's going to add more value.
There, right.
And what?
Well, I think that the section where that house was built is perhaps Residence B, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay, it's right across from Emerson Playfield. I could be wrong, but let's just use it as an example, because it's very close to a number of the two families that you're discussing. So I really think it is a real concern, and I really think that, it could be financially better for a developer because of the demand of these smaller, condo-like housing. You know what I mean? Because it could be seen as a condo, just like on the houses that have been changed on Hubbard Street into, side-by-side duplexes. And then the other key point there, I think, is that because we have this demolition delay law, a lot of these houses could be argued as historic and do give our town, our center of town, a lot of character. So really thinking about how we can preserve those houses and make them more useful in this regard is laudable, but at the same time, it needs to be protected in some way, in my view. I think there needs to be more guidance and more regulations around it, just my opinion. So my question really is, we're talking about this as in Residence C. And one of the concerns I have, especially looking around the United States, is that zoning is changing. The size of zoning, and they're in some cases just taking away single-family zoning. So in terms of these changes that you're making for the Zone C, if for whatever reason we now discuss to widen Zone C, does it automatically say if we agree to widening Zone C, all of this will then be true, even outside of this small zone you're talking about?
Well, it's very unlikely that Zone C's boundaries will change very much, because the lots have already been laid out in these other zoning districts, and they you know, the zone District C is nominally a quarter-acre lot. You occasionally get lots that are bigger.
Okay.
But then, you know, District B is half-acre zoning. So the typical lot, you know, is a half-acre lot. So that, one of the other reasons that we restricted to Residence C is because with a quarter-acre lot size, you get a maximum structure size of 3,600 square feet. So you don't get a giant two-family. And you get in, if you get into Residence B or Residence A, let's say, you could have two 5,400 square foot units joined. That's a two-family, right? So we wanted to stay within the confines of our dimensional requirements of the bylaw, and Residence C gives us an opportunity to do that and effectively limit unit size in a way that the other districts can't.
Okay, thank you. I didn't appreciate how those were drawn.
Any other questions? Okay, then